From the McCourtney Institute for Democracy at Penn State, welcome to Democracy Works. I'm Michael Berkman.
And I'm Chris Beam. And today, Michael, will be talking with Salena Zito, who is the author of The Great Revolt inside the Populist coalition that's reshaping American politics. And as you and all our listeners know, this book was on our Democracy Summer Reading List, which was our last episode from season 1. And there's still a few weeks left of summer, so everybody can check that out if you haven't already.
Salena's based in Pittsburgh, but traveled around the country for this book to interview voters in 5 swing states: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Michigan. Trump endorsed this book.
As did Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, and that's helped it sell quite a few issues. It's been widely reviewed, so it's an interesting piece of work.
Right.
And so she's trying to understand what these people are all about, what they want, why they're supporting Donald Trump. And I think a little bit, at least interesting to me, why is it that Donald Trump can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, as he himself says, and his supporters continue to support him?
Yeah, it is striking, and you see this kind of solidifying entrenchment, maybe even, of support. But the one thing I wanted to mention is, I came to Pennsylvania from Wisconsin. I know that state very well, and she has 3 or 4 vignettes in which she describes parts of Wisconsin where she went and visited people. And I have to say, I thought her descriptions rang very true to me. I thought, from what I know, the places she talked about and the people she interviewed, they seem very accurate to me. So
yeah, she paints a good picture, and she does seem to be able to get people to open up to her.
But there is less focus, I think it's fair to say, on the suburban people in outside Philadelphia, say, who are, have voted Republican for decades, right? But when you look at folks in like Erie, Pennsylvania, who were, kind of from this working class community, Kenosha, Wisconsin is another one, union towns, manufacturing towns, who suddenly just kind of decided that they are done with this. They've had it, and they feel misrepresented or unrepresented, disrespected, and they are going to move to Trump. And so, her argument is that these people are new, that they've created this new coalition within American politics, and that is a big deal.
And I think that in many ways, what comes out in this book is really revealing this way, like the emphasis on trade, which comes up from quite a few people, and the non-issue kind of non-issue kinds of interests of them resonate as well, like this notion of authenticity, which, that what they see in Trump is not so much what he says, but how he says it. That's important because it speaks to a sort of authenticity that they thought was missing. So it's not really a policy agenda, but it's a way of governing.
There's just no disputing that Donald Trump is a unique political actor, and that how he goes about how he went about campaigning, and how he goes about governing shatters expectations regularly, and so the fact that he does that makes one part of the populace extremely angry and one part extremely happy.
Probably a good time now to bring Jenna on and Salena on to talk a bit about this book, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Salena, thanks for joining us on Democracy Works.
Thanks so much for having me.
So your book is called The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. And you wrote that with Brad Todd.
We decided after the election that we wanted to understand if this was a fluke or if this was if Trump election had caused a new coalition. And we decided that it is a new coalition. So we made Brad and I made the decision. I'm the one that went out. He's the one that's smart. I'm the one that can interview people. So I went to all of the 5 Great Lake Midwest states that voted Obama, Trump. So Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. And I wanted to revisit what I saw emerging in 2016 as these different archetypes of surprising voters that were beyond the stereotype of sort of the sort of what the media narrative of who a Trump voter was, because it wasn't that simple. It was complicated and it was interesting, and so I went to 10 different counties, no airplanes, no interstates, all back roads. So there was it says 27,000 in the book. It's actually about 37 miles. And interviewed people that in 10 counties in those states that voted Obama, Trump.
Sure. And so how did you find those people? And I think maybe more importantly, how did you build the trust with them necessary to get them to open up to you and kind of tell you their stories?
Well, this is one of the things where geography and upbringing sort of it plays into my advantage. So geographically, I don't live in Washington or New York. I live in the Paris of Appalachia. I live in Pittsburgh. And so and people from Pittsburgh will argue it's not the Midwest. It's the Midwest. People here behave in very much the way that people do in the Midwest. So with that kind of upbringing, you're sort of able to connect with people, I think, a little easier than sometimes when you live in a larger metropolitan area and everybody's sort of zoom going past each other. So, and in my career, I've done multiple different things. So I'm able to connect with people in multiple different kinds of interests. So I like to bowl. I go to church. I like to go fishing. I love basketball, baseball, soccer. I belong to the Elks. So those things helped me be able to introduce myself and just start talking to people, and so that's how I did it.
Did you have anybody, ask if you were part of the fake news or kind of get that angle of
Oh, I
things?
think there's a lot of pushback, and here's the shocking thing that people don't know yet, because the Democrats aren't in power. Democratic voters feel the exact same way. They have the same sentiments about media. They actually have the same sentiments about larger institutions. Modern populism and is a healthy pushback to all things big. So not just government, not just media, but entertainment and sports and these sort of larger institutions that have been acting as curators and making decisions for us for a very long time. And there's a lot of that on the center left as well. We just don't see it as much because they're not the party in power.
Have you talked with anyone since those interviews for the book to kind of keep tabs on what they're thinking now?
I hear from them all the time, and I go back and forth with them either by phone or text or email. No one has changed their mind. Even the most, in fact, I have found that some of the people in the book's broken down into 7 different archetypes, and we tell the story of about 3 different people of these 5 geographical areas of what their lives are like and how they got to this point. The ones that were the most reluctant are actually the ones that like him the most. No one in any of these archetypes that I interviewed for the book have sort of lost their support for him. Now, one of the things that I think that people miss about understanding, as the president has a series of mishaps, and it seems to happen every week. Every week, you sort of turn on the television or the radio and you hear, this is the most shocking thing ever. This is unprecedented. And, he's not exactly eloquent with his words. He's not very eloquent with his tweets. He tends to be a little bit hyperbole there. But over and over and over again, people say a sort of different variation of this. They say, look, all of our lives, we've had these politicians that speak very eloquently. Their messages are beautiful, but they don't really give us the results of what's in their speeches or what are in their statements. And oftentimes these statements that they don't have we don't know anybody that talks that way, right? And it's probably been focus grouped, and 13 different staffers have put punctuation on it or changed this word or that word. But here's a guy who we don't always like everything he says, maybe not even half the time, but we're actually getting results. So that's, I think, the moment where we're in. I understand it. I think a lot of times my peers have a challenge with understanding that, not because they're not intuitive or smart or anything like that. I think a lot of it has to do with geography.
Right, and so you kind of straddle both worlds, right? You are out there,
Yes.
here in Pittsburgh, and I just mentioned we are recording this here in Pittsburgh today, and you are out talking with all these people in rural America, but you also go on CNN and are part of the media class on some
I'm
level.
part of the fake news.
Yeah, right. So what is that like? Do you feel in some ways like you're an ambassador between the left and the right, or between urban and rural, or all these kind of divides that we have?
I sometimes see my role is in helping people understand that people see things, just because people see things or consume things or read things differently than you doesn't make them your enemy. It's just they have a different life, and that's sort of always been the beauty of our country. Right now, it's like the problem in our country. We don't. I often see people with coexist on their back of their car, and they're usually the people that cut me off. We use it as a catchphrase, but we don't allow people to coexist. I run this class at Harvard. It's called the Main Street Project, in which I take students, IOP students, out and embed them in different parts of the country. And I had them go to church. Took them to a gun range. And they walked, and did a bunch of other things too. Played bocce, went to an opioid center, and they walked away and said, "Yeah, this is good that we know this, that we understand this, we feel this, because they're the next leaders in this country."
I know that Fox News is mentioned a handful of times throughout the book, but did that come up at all in the course of your interviews, in terms of how much of an influence that might have had over how people felt about the president, or about just kind of their situations in general?
Yeah. So in terms of these voters, there's a cross section of what they watched on television. A lot of it is their local news. That's actually where they get their information. So the other day, Monday, the day that the president was in Helsinki, I had just interviewed Steve Scalise, walked back to my car, turned on the radio. I don't remember what station was on, but I heard whoever the anchor was say, "This is the worst thing ever. This is terrible. This is awful." And whoever was on the panel, reinforcing this is unprecedented. It's never happened. And when I'm on CNN, I'm a contributor. I'm probably the most boring person on CNN. I tell people, even though I understand why people voted for Trump, because they live in my beat, the area that I cover, I didn't vote for him. I don't vote in elections that I cover. But oftentimes I'm said, "Well, why don't you tell a Trump voter to think this?" I'm like, that's not my job. I'm a journalist. My job is to understand what's happening and where that is leading. And that's why I felt very passionate about writing this book. I mean, the Great Revolt serves as it's not a book about Donald Trump. If you look at this populist movement as, say, Mount Everest, we're pretty much at base camp. That means we have a long way to go before this is over. And ignoring it or making fun of it or categorizing it into this box that is neat and compact to use, in an elevator pitch, but certainly not demonstrative of who these voters are.
One of the things we talk about a lot is kind of this separation between classical liberalism and democracy. They're kind of coming farther and farther apart. And so on one side you have populism without those liberal institutions behind it, or you have institutions that don't have any type of input from the people.
Right.
Do you have a sense of kind of where things stand on that spectrum, or where from your experiences or from where you sit?
Well, I think the people view it as classical liberalism. I think that the institutions view it the other way. I mean, we're in a really, so this is what happens when new coalitions are formed. It's just that, first of all, it's been a really long time since we've had new coalitions. In American politics, they're usually about 30 years. This one's been really long. This has been since the New Deal.
Right.
And I would argue that the New Deal coalition of Democrats broke apart in 2012. Not in 2008 when Barack Obama first ran, because it was very inclusive. It was very aspirational. It included not only ascending coalitions, but also, the working white class. In 2012, that was it. It was done. It was over. It was multiculturalism. It was, we're global citizens, and he changed the Democratic Party. And so what happened was, you saw the working white class. Some of them did vote for him because they liked him personally. They didn't like. In fact, everyone in the Great Revolt that voted for for Obama still like him. They didn't like his policies, but they liked him personally. It's kind of the opposite with Trump,
right,
where they don't really like him personally, but they love his policies.
Sure.
But in 2012, when Obama made that decision to have that type of election, when he decided to break apart the New Deal coalition, that's when this really started to rapidly come together. It's just that people weren't paying attention to it. They were more focused on the elite and the establishment in both parties in Washington and New York, as opposed to how the people in sort of the interior of the country have been impacted by that realignment.
Sure. And so what do those new coalitions look like, do you think?
The new coalition within the Republican Party has a lot of the old New Deal Democrats as part of it. Now, they weren't people that were alive during FDR, but they were people that are part of that mindset, that tradition, that income equality tradition. So I believe that entitlement reform is not happening in this generation, because that's sort of out the door. That's not going to happen. That sort of Paul Ryanism is that part of the Republican Party has been shoved away. No, it doesn't mean fiscal responsibility isn't in there. It doesn't mean that not big government isn't in there. But those kinds of, the government can be a solution for things is part of this new coalition. You still have the suburban voters, but that's the interesting part of the Great Revolt. It depends on where you're a suburban voter.
Right.
So if you're in a suburban voter in one of those super zip codes, like the 6 counties that's surround Washington, D.C., which are 6 out of the 10 most wealthiest counties in this country, that suburban Republican voter may move towards the Democratic Party.
We talk about a lot, and people who study democracy talk about a lot, is this kind of slide towards authoritarianism and viewing Trump in the model of an autocrat, or something like that. Do the voters that you talked with care about that at all?
They don't see that.
Yeah,
they really don't. I mean, again, they look at the way he talks and some of the flippant things that he says. That's sort of like what I said in 2016. Voters take him seriously, but not literally, and we in the press take him literally, and a lot of people in the press still do not take him seriously. So nobody that voted for him believes that that's where he wants to take the country. Do they think that he has like an ego that would not fit in the room we're in right now? Oh, heck yeah. But they don't, and people are smart. They understand that would be very actually difficult to do in this country. It really would. The closest we've ever come to sort of like a king in this country would have been FDR. I mean, think about that now. 4 times you run, 4 times. That's
Right.
kind of crazy.
right. I know that some of the critics of the book have said that they thought that you were too sympathetic to the people that you interviewed, and maybe didn't kind of take them to task, or call them out on things that they said that might not have been true, or something like that.
There are several people in the book who have minority children, and when I did bring up race, they were very, very upset about that, because first of all, they voted for Obama twice. So they don't understand why people would then turn around and say that you're a racist, and the way they conduct their lives. It's incredibly insulting. If and when, or I asked them all about it, but unless someone demonstrated that behavior, I included it. It never came up.
Right. So what is that disconnect, do you think? Why is race so often painted as part of this Trump voter narrative if it doesn't seem to be something that's a concern?
I think that sometimes when you don't understand why someone makes the vote or the decision that they make in life, it's easier to throw a label on it and stop the conversation rather than actually listening to something longer than an elevator pitch as to why you've made the decisions that you have. We do that on both sides. I don't think that's very healthy.
And so you've spent your career talking to people, right, and having these conversations in an effort to try to get to know people, get underneath that surface level. Do you have advice for people who are not professional journalists but are interested in that kind of dialogue or, getting that deeper level of understanding?
Put your phone away. Don't take a selfie of you having a conversation with someone. I always say, just challenge yourself. Go to something completely different than you would. Go to bingo. Go to a chess match. Go to a rock concert, a rap concert, a country music concert, whatever the thing that you don't know. And just step back and first be an observer and watch how people interact with each other. Watch how people are having fun. And it gives you a better understanding of who the people are before you make a snap judgment. I don't think snap judgments are only probably really good when you're in a really serious situation and you better either do something or you might fall off a cliff.
Yeah. The other thing that struck me about the book from a democracy perspective is just the people that said that they voted for Donald Trump after not having voted for years, if not decades.
Yeah. They sort of come in and out of the electoral process every few years. They're like Haley's Comet.
Right. And so, I mean, that is, regardless of how you feel about Trump as a candidate or as president, I think there's something to be said there for just the fact that he was able to engage people in wanting to exercise their kind of democratic rights or,
right. I remember going to an energy company down in Charleroi, Pennsylvania. And there was a voter registration there, and it was a nonpartisan group that came there, and they were just registering people to vote. And there was a guy who was registering to vote. He was 60 years old. It was the first time he ever registered. And after he signed up, he just started tear. I mean, this is this big burly guy, right? And I'm looking at him, and he's tear. I'm like, "Are you crying?" Of course, no filter, right? I'm like, "Are you crying?" He goes, "Yeah, I am. This is actually really important to me. For the first time in my life, this is important to me." And I would put him in that Peroista category, people that weren't engaged. There were several people in the book that had never voted before at all. And it was astounding that they were that moved and motivated.
Yeah. Do you think they'll vote again this coming November?
Yeah. I've been talking to them. Yeah. They can't wait to show up to vote. There was one guy in Youngstown, his name was Jeej. He did not make the book, but I talked to him when I took my students to Youngstown, the Harvard students to Youngstown, and I said, "So you going to show up for the midterms?" He goes, I wish I could go tomorrow. I can't wait to vote again." So I thought that was kind of cool.
Do you think that anybody that you talked to for the book would vote for a Democrat, in the future?
In the Democratic Party, as it exists right now, no. Now, if they made some fundamental changes, yes, but they don't feel welcome. It's not. That's the thing about this coalition. It's impacting things outside the ballot box.
Right.
So that's where this coalition to work. The frontier is outside the ballot box.
Well, I think we're going to bring things to a close here. So the McCourtney Institute, we do our own poll. We call it the Mood of the Nation poll, and it's an open-ended public opinion poll. So I have 4 questions for you.
Okay.
This will be kind of a lightning round. So thinking specifically about American politics, what makes you angry?
Just when we make fun of each other, that really, on both sides, that really upsets me. It takes a lot to make me angry, but that can get my blood to boil.
And what makes you proud?
Oh, this is a great country. We're very aspirational. People miss that. The one thing that's amazing about this country is people always want to be part of something bigger than themselves. That they identify themselves as being uniquely American.
Yeah, that kind of sense of exceptionalism,
Yeah.
for sure. And then what makes you worry?
I'm gonna have to go back to the first question. We need to respect each other more. And I think one of the things missing in our country is a lack of belonging to little civic groups like Elks or Freemasons or Rotary clubs or things like that. Those are the kinds of groups that would build a school playground.
Yeah.
Or do something at the senior center or whatever. Do these little things in the communities. None of them ever involved politics. I'm an Elk. I have no idea what my fellow Elks political persuasion are.
Right.
We just do things to make our community better.
Yeah.
I think we need more of that.
And then finally, what gives you hope?
I'm gonna have to go back to the American people. They really do. It's a great country. I've been to 49 out of the 50 states. The only one wasn't Hawaii. It's because I can't drive there. But I just drove from Savannah to Pittsburgh only using an old U.S. route. It took me 15 hours. There was nothing more hopeful that I saw in all those little communities along the way is this country. People helping each other. I went to a Watermelon Day parade, which was awesome. A barbecue. I just stopped. There was a church having a choir. Just stopped. This is a great country. We need to step back and go out. Actually, we need to lean in and go and visit it and enjoy it.
Salena, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that was really, really interesting, and she's a very open and honest person. It actually kind of, Michael, reminded me of this German term, Grenzperson, which literally means border person, and someone who's a Grenzperson is somebody who sees their job as kind of explaining one side to the other.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. There always has been an important strand of populism in American politics, and the Trump campaign is notable for the way that it was able to mobilize this populism into a winning presidential coalition. And I think that it's a populism that we saw in the Sanders campaign, much as we saw in the Trump campaign, but with some very different and I think important and meaningful twist to it. But she does raise the issue about whether or not this is what we're going to see in American politics going forward.
Right.
Like that the Republican Party is going to become a populist party. And this is a really interesting and important question right now because on the one hand, Donald Trump does have remarkable control over the Republican Party. And as we're in the midst of primary season right now, we've seen it again and again.
No, there's no doubt about that. And I, for one, did not see that comment.
Yeah,
so.
that sort of electoral strength within the party. Now, maybe if the Democrats have a big victory in 2018, which seems possible, that a lot of the wind will go out of that sail.
If the Democrats
if the Democrats have a big win, a lot of the wind will go out of this Trump sail.
Yeah, it might. Or they may just, the Republicans just decide that they've hitched their wagon to the star and there's no turning
right.
around.
But whichever way this goes in terms of Donald Trump's political power going forward, this populism is real,
yes.
and it's real because it speaks to continuing problems within the entire Western world, including the United States, aggravated by increasing inequality, and that there are communities in distress, from economic sources beyond their control, from drugs beyond their control,
and also from let's face it, there is a cultural shift going on. And for folks who had expectations about the way their life was going to go, not just economically, but also in terms of just mores and patterns of behavior and expectations, all of those are likewise being assaulted. And so all of that is part of this overwhelming sense of I am unhappy and I'm disrespected.
Well, and the sense of cultural loss as well.
Right.
Right. That, I mean, she emphasizes multiple times, and I think it's important that the like the cities are some sort of foreign territory, you know. And she talks about how, you know, these people, they really go to the city, you know, because they want to see the Statue of Liberty and catch a Broadway show. But the sense that, you know, we can't really trust what's coming from reporters who are coming out of the cities, and we can't trust the media that's coming out of the cities. I do think and that the cities symbolize, they symbolize a sort of multiculturalism, a sort of acceptance, a sort of moving forward culturally and socially that many of these people feel left behind.
Well, and they have no interest in doing it.
And they have no interest
Right,
in doing
right.
it. Right. And they see it as coming from they see it coming at their expense.
Well, and that there is an inherent dismissal, disrepute that the city holds with
Right.
respect to their choices.
Yeah, I wish she had dug more into that with them, but she does, in a way, really articulate it through her own comments.
Right.
I think about the cities and about people from them. I mean, she has certain caricatures of that clearly enter into what she was doing.
Yeah, and so you know, her book is an extremely important effort to understand this political moment in which we find ourselves in our
I mean,
political history.
When you think about the books that we reviewed in that last episode, you know, several of them talk about the sort of populist uprising throughout the Western world. And what she's doing is moving that from sort of this macro look at politics to, you know, well, who are these people and what is it that they're thinking about that's important? And that's really valuable.
Yeah, I think so too.
So thanks for joining us today. Democracy Works is produced by the McCourtney Institute for Democracy at Penn State. We want to give a special thanks to WESA in Pittsburgh for lending us their studio to record the interview with Salena.
Yeah, that was very generous of them. So we want to encourage you to visit our website, www.democracyworkspodcast.com. You can find more information about Salena and her book, The Great Revolt. The website also has information on how to contact us. And we'd love to hear your feedback. We take it seriously. We have set up interviews because of what we've heard from our listeners. So please get in contact with us.
And finally, if you like what you've heard today, make sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.